Alright, here we are again. I'm Mark Moore. This is SM Art, second video 2, making a QP. Hi, welcome back. I'm Mark. I'm here today to go ahead and explain a wee bit more of my sequel to The Wizard of Oz, which is a little more adult than the actual Wizard of Oz. You might think of the Wizard of Oz like, well, what it would have been. A story as told by an 8-year-old girl. Well, this is more like a story as told by a 22-year-old girl, having been disillusioned, disappointed, and then disowned. But I'm just here talking about the mechanics of everything. So my Oz has become a floating city, an island in the sky, with several other tributary islands, all chained together by a large chain for the most part. One or two chains have lost a link and therefore broken and not been fixed, because one thing you can't seem to do is get anyone who does heroin to do anything productive. It seems. Well, so Oz has become very rich, very paranoid. They, in their greed, once they saw how much money could be made, they wanted all the money. So they went ahead and opened a casino. The casino was lush, lavish, definitely Las Vegas. I mean, they should have been thinking more like Laughlin. So, now, the one thing you need when you have a casino is a way to get your patrons to you. So, Oz in its finite wisdom started cobbling together different things that had arrived in Oz unceremoniously from the tornadoes that now hold Oz aloft. So, by putting them together with a take on originality and what they had found, they cobbled together magically several different things. You see, many things arrived in Oz wasn't necessarily ready for, having not created them themselves. Not the least of which is gasoline. Gasoline, internal combustion engines, gunpowder, firepower for that matter, has suddenly come into play in the last 100 years or so in Oz. Now, while it's only been 20-something years here, it's been well over 100 there. Time doesn't pass in equal increments. So, the Wiz, putting every stop he can come up with, thinks, well, how would I do it if I was a casino? I would have a shuttle bus. So, employing his fleet of dirigibles, airships that is, that were created for transport have now become people transport in wagons of war. So, following with their new title and position, they have a new look. Slightly looking like a Hindenburg, but more like a Hindenburg crossed with a U-boat. With one final little shout out, I guess you could say, in design to Spanish galleons. Because in addition to looking like a U-boat, but traveling like a Zeppelin, they have cannon ports, since they don't have to be watertight. Down each side, they have rows of cannons, just like an old Spanish galleon, right? So when they go to launch an attack, they'll broadside you. Just picture what it might look like. You know, if you see some of my paintings, you can picture what it would look like to be attacked by a U-boat that flew up on you from the sky and then began broadsiding you with cannonballs. So what I've been doing here is I'm simply laying out my rough, I guess you'd say, relationships in my painting. The painting that I'm working on right now is a view from Oz, one of the most scenic vistas on Oz. It's the Great Lake. The Great Lake was created by magically teleporting an entire river to Oz continuously, as Oz needs water now that it's not on the ground. It might get rain, but that's not nearly enough. Well, Oz solved the problem with a little bit of magic. They went ahead and Bushka, could I have a light? The Great Lake. Thank you. The Great Lake teleports a river from ground to Oz. Once it arrives on Oz, though, they have way too much flow. They don't need that much flow. Do they ramp it back? No. Why would they ramp it back? Oz is nothing if not greedy. Well, the river would form a lake, or in this case, a negative edge lake. If you're familiar with pools, a negative edge pool is one where the pump causes water to flow, overflow, an edge of the pool. This takes all refuse like leaves and such off with it as it goes. Well, Oz has much the same thing, except for it's a lake pouring off the side of a floating island. Now, Oz passing overhead, and I say passing overhead because although it was originally moored to the ground with great chains clad in gold, those chains have long since been busted. Oz now floats freely where the winds have it, and uses its fleet of airships to bring the customers to it for the casino and all other practices, I guess you'd say. So when you see a road sign for Oz, the arrow points upward and always says 8 miles, even though it's not technically truly 8 miles aloft. It is effectively 8 miles away straight up. Now, Oz being airshipped, all produce and such that isn't grown on Oz must be aired into Oz. Their fleet of ships is kind of stretched, what with it being their muscle, their transport for their own cargo, and their transport for their casino and such. Civilian transport. It's stretched to the limits. It takes several mages on each ship to keep each ship moving, because one thing arrived on Oz, changing the scale of everything almost as much as pistols and firearms. What it was internal combustion motors. Internal combustion motors, though, while some would arrive on Oz intact, because some items, although they fall from 10 miles, hit the ground with the expected speed, some items actually land gently enough to not even disturb a glass. But the one thing that usually doesn't arrive in any quantity in Oz is gasoline. So after the initial glut of having the internal combustion engines arrive and them discovering what power they hold, they built highways. Then the highways were superseded completely by the airships, so they all died off. All these little towns, just like Route 66 in America, dying off. all these small towns that had made their living off of Route 66, or in this case, off of the freeways or highways, suddenly has no business because no one's driving, everyone's flying, and there is no gasoline. You know, how does an airship power its motors when the gasoline doesn't exist? Well, they don't. And the ones that do, anyways, do magic. Now, a mage can go ahead and make that engine move if he concentrates on it continuously with the right spell. So each engine or motor in the airship has a mage working it all the time. That's expensive. Oz would much rather do away with the mages and fire it all up on gas, but they can't. Now, shortly after DT arrives, that's my Dorothy with her dog Scroto. Scroto has giant blue balls that he's continuously licking all the time everywhere he goes. Can you really blame him that he would have giant blue balls? After all, he lives with an over-the-top stripper and has his whole life. They arrive in Oz, and having met the Munchies and stomped their fucking asses, Munchies are Munchkins. They find that the Munchkins have all become fat gang member candy whores, so to say, because they raise the sugar beets. They make the candy, they make the sugar for the entire world, pretty much, or at least the entire known country. So, when she arrives, they're making popsicles and lollipops and everything under the sun that you can make with sugar, except for they only have wine and beer. No good beer. The wine is more than decent, though most people think it's too sweet. When DT takes over, because she takes the role of the previous witch after her strip joint lands on the previous witch, killing her. Well, actually, can't kill no bitch wearing no ruby slippers is what escapes the witch's mouth shortly before the strip joint lands on her. Now, when this strip joint lands on her, it doesn't kill her outright. The strip joint lands on her, pinning her head to the ground with the entire building, well, the entire trailer at least, converted trailer. When it lands on her, she's still alive. So DT standing right there before it lands, she has heard the speech. She's caught lightning bolts from the witch and given the witch a couple of Colt Python 357s in the chest. Find that not effective. Well, a strip joint pins the witch to the ground by her head, and she immediately starts clawing and wriggling, trying to get out from underneath the building. She's trying to claw her nails right through the building because she can't die, you see. Ruby slippers prevent this. But DT, being a quick thinking individual she is, takes the shoes off her. No more ruby slippers, no more staying alive. Then the strip joint drops that extra foot, kabloom, that it was resting on her head. Now she's dead. DT puts the ruby slippers on. Now she can't be killed. The Munchkins attack her. She defeats them unceremoniously by kicking their butts, most of them literally. Ruby slippers make wonderful combat boots when you think combat. So, she takes over as the witch and notices the witch had been keeping them under her thumb, due in part to the fact that they have no business to sell their candy. Anybody can make candy. Nobody wants candy except for hopheads anyways. But DT, being the enterprising individual that she is, and having lived for some time in the South, teaches them how to make moonshine. And she makes some really killer hooch. She's an alcoholic, pillaholic, potaholic, against crystal methaholic. She takes anything other than heroin. She's always stayed away from that. I guess you could say that part of her is me. So she teaches them how to make hooch. And then, since no one else on Oz has anything equivalent of hard liquor, proceeds to see a market for her wares. Because she, as far as she realizes, is stuck in Oz. She doesn't have a way back home, but she does see that she has a product no one else can go ahead and match. So she wants to sell her product. In order to sell her product, she goes to get the wizard to approve her as the sole distributor for the entire casino, and indeed the entire world that is known. So that's why she takes off on her epic journey, meeting the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. Although the Scarecrow is an actual scarecrow in my story, I based it on an L. Frank Baum character, the man who wrote The Wizard of Oz. See, he had created a character called Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead is a scarecrow with a jack-o'-lantern for a head. But what happens when you carve a jack-o'-lantern? What immediately begins to happen to the jack-o'-lantern? It starts to go bad. It starts to rot. And the more his head rots, the more rotten his brain becomes. His thought process becomes more, not rotten as in you dirty, rotten scoundrel. Rotten as in doesn't work correctly. So his head must be replaced periodically. Well, Melonhead, my scarecrow, is very much the same character. Other than his demeanor, he's a candle. The candle, once lit inside of a jack-o'-lantern, animates it. So, new body, new head, no big deal. Candle's indestructible. You're just going to have somebody who's willing to find it and put it into a new head once there's one carved. So, now she's begun in earnest to solicit to the wizard to be the sole distributor for booze to the casino in the Kingdom Beyond. That's what sets her off to Oz, not hoping to return to Earth where her life kind of sucks. Her boyfriend cheats on her. She's a stripper for a little tiny strip joint in the middle of nowhere, and now that place is gone, complete. The only thing she really had that she gave a shit about besides her car that he wrecked 2 weeks before this whole story begins is Scroto, the love of her life. And Scroto's with her there, so why bother trying to get home? So she sets off, meets Scarecrow. The two of them again set off, and then they meet Tin Man. Tin Man is not a man, although he is a Tin Lizzie. He is a 19, I believe, somewhere in the vicinity of 1920 or 30 Ford tow truck. Ford, baby. Ford outrunning deputies. That's what Ford means. The tow truck and snowplow is the Tin Man. Kind of a little bit of Bumblebee from the Transformers in the ability to maneuver himself or manipulate himself. But in order to run that motor, you gotta have go-go juice. Well, as Tin Man revs his motor, he feels his heart race. As his aspiration increases, he starts panting in his mind. He breathes harder. He goes ahead and his heart racing. He's thrilled by it. He loves the speed. And once DT and Scarecrow reveal their product, and they mention that it would run a motor, Tin Man is now part of the group. So the two of them are off to see the Wizard to get the contract for the exclusive distributorship for Bitches Brew Moonshine. Now, that's when they come across a roadblock. Now the roadblock is run by a sheriff who no longer has a jurisdiction or a town. He just has a roadblock holding passers-by for ransom for toll on the road. Because there's so few passers-by, he's a little greedy and a little desperate. And he's a cowardly lion, L-Y-I-N-G, lying. Because no one thinks he tells the truth and everyone thinks he's a little pussy. Because you see, my cowardly lion is only 2.5 feet tall. Fully erect, he's 2.5 feet tall. He's a southern beer swilling, pot smoking biker. Just, albeit a small one. Then the four of them together with Dame Scroto take off to find the Wizard. And after that, the Wicked Witch of the West, baby. Yahoo. But that's part 3.